everybody, this is Detroit AllyCat, and I am having a very hard time figuring out how to start this video. We're just gonna start it. This is one of the cases that I had a feeling that I was eventually going to do, but I kind of dreaded doing it, and it's been requested over and over and over. So today we are going to cover it. And I'm a little nervous about covering it, to be honest with you. So without further ado, let's get spooky. Like I said, I'm Detroit AllyCat, and if it's your first time visiting my channel, I do true crime, pagan stuff, I do spooky ghost stories, anything weird and unusual. I love looking into things and discovering things that other people haven't discovered. And if you like my channel, please feel free to subscribe, like, leave a comment. All those things keep my channel going, and they give me like the push to keep me going, which I desperately need sometimes. On that note, let's talk about the case we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about Gabriel Fernandez. Gabriel Fernandez lived in Palmdale, California, and he lived from February 20th, 2005 to May 24th, 2013. He was just 8 years old when the 911 call came in that Gabriel had tripped and fallen and he wasn't breathing. And immediately, first responders came to the apartment complex and started trying to resuscitate him and rushed him to the hospital as soon as possible. First responders and paramedics and the police and firefighters and everyone involved found was something that just could not be explained, and it opened up a case that was incredible. And 2 days later, 8-year-old Gabriel would be dead. And this is his story that I'm going to tell you. So before we hop into this story, for those of you who haven't heard of this case, which I'm guessing a lot of you have heard of this case, especially if you saw the title of this video. But for those of you who haven't, I just want to say that this case is going to be brutal. There is a 6-episode documentary on Netflix, and it actually is one of the things that pushed me into doing true crime, because I felt like these stories needed to be told, and not everybody got a 6-episode little docu-series like this did. But there are things in the episode that they didn't focus on a lot because they wanted to go with the overall what was important in the case and what the case was about, and it was very well done, and I loved it a lot. And I remember watching it and thinking, I'm not going to do this case because there's no way that I can say something that this docu-series is not going to be able to say. But I'm going to tell you about things that maybe you didn't actually hear in the case. And with that, I want to talk about something that's been troubling me lately. When I watched the Gabriel Fernandez case, I had a lot of sleepless nights. And every time I get involved in these types of true crime cases, I find myself thinking about these cases a lot. And I just want to say that there are many reasons why you would watch this case, but I feel like if you're going to take your time to learn about this case and you're going to listen to this little boy's story, I think you should really remember it and take it to heart. I know a lot of people like to listen to true crime because it's for entertainment purposes, but this story, it it's not for entertainment purposes. This little boy could have been saved so many times, and so many things happened to him that were so wrong on so many different levels. And I feel like sometimes the community needs to jump in as a whole and really understand how to stop something like this from happening, or at least not be afraid to be a part of the movement of ending things like this. And that's something I wanted to talk about, because like I feel guilty. I feel guilty about talking about cases like this, because it's not a story. It's a little boy who was murdered and tortured, and honestly, it's one of the most horrific crimes that I've ever studied. And I've studied some bad ones. On that note, I'm gonna give you guys like a warning that Gabriel was a very kind-hearted, beautiful, sweet little boy. You will absolutely fall in love with him, and your heart will break when you hear what happened to him. So if you are triggered by child abuse and violence to children and homicide to children, I always like to tell you and give you a chance to like not be a part of this moment with me, and go somewhere else where there are happy bouncing bunnies, because I don't feel a lot of happiness in this case at all. With all those disclaimers that I put out there, I would like to tell you Gabriel's story through Detroit AllyCat's eyes, and it really will be through my eyes, because a lot of people see things a lot of times differently. Tell me if you see something that you think I didn't see, or if I was wrong about something. I love to learn things, and just be respectful though. Be nice, people. Be nice. The world is a very harsh, ugly place, which I'm about to prove. So be nice. All right, enough with the dramatics. Let's just jump right into the case. In the beginning, they really wanted to figure out what happened to Gabriel. Why had this occurred? And they wanted to document the things that they saw when they first arrived to the apartment complex that Gabriel lived in. And the reason they started asking Gabriel's parents, which they had claimed to be on the 911 phone call, what happened. Now, what happened is that Gabriel was in the apartment with his two siblings and his mother, his biological mother, and his biological mother's boyfriend. His biological mother's name was Gabriel Fernandez, and her boyfriend's name was Isauro Aguirre. Now listen, I've been struggling with this name for a very long time. If I said it wrong, I do apologize, but it is not the simplest of names for me to say. I always say that when there's a hardcore name out there, but I don't want you to focus on how I'm saying his name wrong and take away from the case. They get into the apartment, and there are multiple stories being told, which is a red flag right away. Like, Pearl is saying something about how he tripped in a bathtub. Then Isauro says that he was wrestling with his brother and sister, and he tripped and he fell. And that is kind of impossible. And then they also tell the firefighters that are there to do the emergency services that Gabriel is a liar and he's gonna lie to you. This is what they're saying about their 8-year-old little boy who's sitting there naked and lifeless on the ground. Like, I'm just gonna, I know you guys hate when I put my opinion in there, but if my child is laying naked and lifeless on the ground, the last thing I'm gonna do is start saying that, he's a liar or he does this wrong or that wrong, I'm gonna be panicking. My like mother emotion inside of me is gonna be like freaking out, like, please save him, please help him, get him back on track. He is laying there lifeless. And the firefighters are like noticing things about him, like his whole entire body is covered from head to toe with all these marks. And like the marks are like literally everywhere, like from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. And the firefighters are thinking, well, maybe he's got some kind of skin condition, like that is making him look like this, because there's no other explanation for why he would look like this. Like, they've never seen an abuse case that bad. But that was literally what had happened to him, is that he was literally beat everywhere on his entire body. And something else that one of the firefighters remembered immediately, and it stood out in his mind, is Isauro went up to him and he said, well, he's gay. Why would you say that? Like, okay, he's 8, and what does that matter about resuscitating him? But that is what he said. He said he's gay. That's something that stood out in their minds. They immediately take little Gabriel and they take him to the hospital, and in the hospital they try to start saving his life. And they're like looking at all of these injuries and everything that happened to him, and they're like writing it down, they're documenting it, and they're taking these pictures of him. And every single person in that room is just like, they've never seen anything like that. Now, we're talking about Los Angeles. It's like the Los Angeles hospital or something like that. If you're in LA, one of the most populated places in America, it's like its own, like California is like its own little country. And they're saying they've never seen anything like that. That says a lot. It says a lot, because a lot of crazy things happen in LA. They get him stabilized and they transfer him over to the Children's Hospital in LA County. And unfortunately, when they get him there, Gabriel goes brain dead, and 2 days later, he ends up dying. Let's talk about some of the backstory of how this happened, what occurred, like who the people are that are involved in this, because Gabriel has a really intricate story for being just 8 years old. Gabriel was born to Pearl Hernandez, and Pearl is a very special person. You try to, like, I can't say that you feel sorry for her, because I don't feel sorry for her at all. Not even a little bit, because I promise you, when you look at her, it's like looking at pure evil. Pearl was born in August 29, 1983. She has 4 kids with someone named Arnold Contreras. And Arnold, at this time, when Gabriel had passed away, was incarcerated. She had 4 children with Arnold Contreras. And at this time, Arnold was actually incarcerated, and he was not in Gabriel's life at that time. Pearl kind of has like a backstory to her. She had 2 parents that were actually together, and they were Gabriel's grandparents. But according to Pearl, her mother did not like her and hit her a lot. And also, according to Pearl, her father was in and out of jail constantly. So it was like she had a revolving door as a not revolving, that's horrible. That's not what I mean. She didn't really have her father around for like a long period of time before he would also be incarcerated. And Pearl started using methamphetamine and started drinking at 9 years old. She also ran away around 10 or 11, and she was kept by a group of teens believed to be in a gang and was passed around and raped repeatedly. So Pearl was pretty hard, and she had some very bad times in her life. She had also stated that she had been raped by one of her uncles. She had spent some time in a mental facility where she was diagnosed with depressive disorder, developmental disabilities, personality disorder, and PTSD. And also, they found that she basically had the level of a 8th grade education, and she had the intellectual capacity of a 2nd grader. So the word mentally retarded, I guess you don't even use that word anymore. Like, mentally not, she obviously was not mentally developed intellectually, because she just didn't, she wasn't, something was wrong with her. And she just did not think the same way. Like, I saw, like, a bunch of times when they did, like, some filming of her in prison, and I listened to her and how she would talk to the prison guards and how she would talk to the other prisoners, and you can definitely tell that there is something wrong with her. Like, it seems like she's not even aware that she's in prison. Like, I mean, she just, I don't know. There's just, something's not right. And I'm not telling you to feel bad for her. I'm just telling you that this is someone that's not altogether there at all. And unfortunately, she should have gotten help, or somebody should have like said something to somebody. I mean, she spent time in a mental facility, then somebody must have I don't know what I'm fucking saying, man. Yeah, so she basically was not all together there. And the thing about it is that Pearl always made it out like she was the victim of every single situation. And a lot of these stories I'm telling you, these are like stories that Pearl told people herself. Well, her family said that she was very manipulative, and she would go around telling people, like, my boyfriends abused me. She told everybody that all of her past relationships had all abused her, but her family said that she was actually the one who was abusive to them, and she would manipulate people to do what she wanted. So I don't know many 2nd graders that are that manipulative. So I don't know. There's some holes in that story. But Pearl is kind of like, she's a character for sure. Like, if you get a chance, watch the Netflix docuseries and you will see what I mean. She just, she is the definition of icky woman. That's what I think. So, Gabriel's real father, his name was Arnold Contreras. Did I say that right? And despite the fact that he'd spent a large amount of time in prison, this was kind of like the nice guy out of the situation. I know that sounds weird, but Arnold had been told while he was in prison that his son was on life support and he was going to die. Somehow he got to go see his son. Like, it was either right before he died or right after he died. And he was really upset. And he basically felt that it was his fault that his son had died because he wasn't able to be there for him. And, they did a lot of, different interviews with him, and they talked to him, and he seemed like he just really regretted not being in Gabriel's life, not being able to watch what happened. Yeah, when he took the stand, he cried, and not to say that that means anything, but you could tell that he felt very remorseful, and there was a lot of eyewitness accounts that when he was with his children, he was a very loving father. He cared for his kids. He just made a lot of bad choices. And when I say bad choices, there are different crimes you can do. You can do petty theft and still be a good person, believe it or not. But when you start getting into violent crimes rape, murder, stuff like that, it's a whole nother ball game. You can screw up but still be good. And this is kind of Arnold's case. And according to what I researched about Arnold, he ended up not ever going back to prison. He ended up moving, and on his Facebook there's all these pictures of him and Gabriel, and he just talks about how much he misses him. When Pearl found out that she was pregnant with Gabriel, her parents did not want her to have another child. They felt that she didn't even take care of the kids that she already had. They felt that she was very manipulative, that she just was not a good mom, and they just did not think that another child being brought into the equation was a good idea. However, her great uncle, Michael Lemos Corenza, wanted to have a son. And he kind of convinced Pearl hey, you should have this baby and then give him up for adoption to me and my partner. And his partner was actually David Martinez. These were two gay men that were together, and they really wanted to have a son, and they felt that, this was their one opportunity to have a little boy. When Pearl was pregnant, she, carried the baby to full term. She was at the hospital, and she basically called Michael and David and said, hey, I just had your baby, come pick him up, and then left the baby there for them. And they went and they got him, and they were so happy, really, really happy. This little boy was so loved by these two men. They spent a lot of time together. They cherished Gabriel. He was in a very good house. He was always well taken care of. They interviewed David later on, and, he said that he was thankful to Pearl for giving them the time that they got with Gabriel, because he was able to experience having a son, and they loved him so much. And when he's talking about it, you can just see in his eyes how much he loved him. But however, his grandparents, Gabriel's grandparents, Pearl's parents, Robert and Sandra Fernandez, they did not agree with letting their grandson live in a homosexual household. And so all of a sudden there was these allegations of sexual abuse to Gabriel, and they started saying that, Gabriel needed to come back and live with them. And unfortunately, Gabriel was taken away from these two men that very much loved him, and he was put with his biological grandparents. Now, I find this kind of funny because the biological grandparents are the ones where, Pearl said that her mother used to hit her and her father was in and out of jail and prison all the time. But apparently, Gabriel's other siblings, his two other siblings, they don't really talk about the third sibling. So I have a feeling that that third sibling was adopted somewhere down the road. I didn't do much research on it, but the two other siblings were actually with the biological grandparents. So Gabriel got to go live with his biological grandparents. He got to be with his brother and sister, which he really, really wanted to be with his brother and sister. Apparently, while Gabriel was staying with his grandparents, the grandparents let Michael and David, his adoptive parents, come visit Gabriel all the time, and they all four worked together to parent Gabriel. This is just my opinion. I think that if there was cause for concern that Gabriel had been sexually assaulted by them, that they wouldn't let him see him. That's just my personal opinion. Now, we're going to move on to the other person in this story. We are going to talk about Isauro Aguirre, and that is Pearl's boyfriend. Pearl met Isauro about a year and a half before Gabriel died. Isauro was kind of like, when she met him, he was like a security guard, and Isauro was a very big guy. He was 6'2", he weighed 270 pounds, and he felt like, Pearl was like this amazing woman, and that he would never be able to get a woman like her. And I don't understand that, but apparently he felt like he lucked out with Pearl because she was just really great looking woman. So he pretty much did whatever she told him. Like, she kind of like was in charge of the situation. And that I really do believe, because there's been some recordings where you can actually hear when Pearl and Isauro are talking over the phone. And by the way, if you go to prison, just know that if you're on the phone, they're like recording you and listening to you. And so many times people say that and they still talk about what they do, like, in prison, on the phone, being recorded. I don't get it, but whatever. So, somehow Pearl and Isauro is talking on the phone, and like Pearl is like telling him, like, remember when Gabriel fell down on the bike? And she's like screaming at him, like basically telling him what he's supposed to tell, the authorities, so she doesn't get in trouble. And you could just tell that she's like the boss in the situation. But what's really odd about this situation is that before Isauro was a security guard, he was a primary caretaker at an elderly home, and he was also a driver there. And what I think really, really caught me off guard is the way that his former employer talked about Isauro. She basically said that he was a gentle giant and a teddy bear. He was kind. He took care of all of the residents all the time, and everybody that, like, all the residents that lived there, they wanted Isauro to take care of him. And he had like a nickname from like everybody that was there. It was Shaggy. And they said that he always looked out for the residents. I mean, and we're talking like some of his duties were to change their diapers. And they said he was the most kind, gentle, humane person ever. And like when he would drive them around, he would suggest they took longer routes so they could see more like scenery and scenic routes, so it would bring them more pleasure. And the thing is that, when his employer came up and did this character witness, this isn't something that was easy for her to do. She had to literally change her name and move away because she was being threatened for saying this on stand. So for her to go on there, up there, and risk her, risk being known as the person that like stood up for this child murderer, that kind of says something. And, you know, he also had another fellow worker go up, and they were another character witness. Now, I'm not saying at all, you should think that I feel bad for this person, because I do not feel bad for any 6'2", 270-pound man that beats on an 8-year-old. I don't know. I mean, I can speculate as to what happened and why it happened. I truly think that, you know, Isauro just basically saw Pearl as this amazing woman and didn't really care about anything else but her. And I don't know how that happens, because, like, isn't there a point, like, in your life where you're like, no, this is wrong? And I mean, I'm feeling like that threshold would be beating an 8-year-old, but apparently it wasn't in Isauro's case. His family actually had a nickname for him too. It was Tony, which I wish I could call him, because that's so much easier than Isauro, but I will continue to call him Isauro. You know, he also did not like the fact that he thought that Gabriel was gay, because he talks about it a lot. He mentioned it when they came to find Gabriel. I think that says something about him. It really does. I don't know if it's like a cultural thing or just like a personal thing. I don't know where that came from, but it was definitely something that had the characteristics of a hate crime. Gabriel was like the soft-spoken, sweet boy, and Isauro was like this big, manly, like, rawr kind of guy. And I think that he just felt like, you know, Gabriel was not up to par. And that's too bad, because, I mean, I would have loved to have Gabriel as a son. So I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't get any of it. And this, I don't. And there are just some cases that I hate. And this case is one of them. And I'm trying to, like, get through it, but it's so hard for me to, because I don't get it. But we're going to keep going. So that's you watching me not disconnect from this case like I've been accused of before, because I definitely did not disconnect from this case. And Gabriel will be with me forever. Probably to the day I die. I will never forget Gabriel. And I'm going to keep going, because if I keep doing this, I'm just going to start crying. And I don't want to start crying, because, you know, that's going to crack my makeup. Isauro, it was said that Isauro convinced Pearl that they should get Gabriel from his grandparents, or all of the kids, as a matter of fact, all 3. And the reason for that is because they wanted the child support. They basically told the workers or whoever that, you know, the grandparents were not treating the children well, and they wanted their kids back, which for some reason everyone, like, these child protective places and these workers, they always want to, like, bring these kids back to, like, these parents, because that's the best place for them. No, that's not the best place for them, because Pearl at that time, she was like, kind of like a gangbanger, and, like, you can tell in some of the pictures, and I hate to be so judgmental like that, but I mean, people, like, said she was like a gangbanger, and she had already things in her file basically saying that she didn't treat her other 2 kids good, that she neglected them, She just was not fit to be a parent. If it was in her file that she had the intellect of a second grader, why would you give them 3 kids? And Isauro had to work as a security guard, so he's not going to be there to be able to make sure that she's taking care of the kids. But guess what? Pearl gets all 3 of the kids. Pearl gets these kids back, and for whatever reason, the 2 other siblings, they were never abused, or there was never mention of it, or there was none of that kind of thing that happened to Gabriel happened to them. But, I mean, it was in her file that she had neglected them or whatever. So that could be a lot of things, like leaving kids alone for a long time, not feeding them properly, not bathing them properly, letting them run around the neighborhood. Neglect is a very big, there's like 1 to 10, what kind of neglect. While Gabriel was staying with Pearl and Isauro, Gabriel would go to 1st grade, and that is where he met Jennifer Garcia, which was his 1st grade teacher. And Jennifer said that she witnessed multiple times where Gabriel came into the school and he was dirty, hungry, scared. He just did not seem right. Bruises, marks. There was one time at the very close to the end where hair had been ripped out of his head and he had like a black eye and a fat lip. And, so she would call the Child Protective Services, and she told them, like, hey, this kid is in trouble. You need to go check this out. They would go and they would go check it out, and they would do nothing. And Gabriel would come back to school, and then he would ask her, like, hey, can you please call those people to please come check on me? And so she did again, and nothing happened. And then he started showing up with all these bruises, and he didn't want to tell his teacher what was going on. And so she asked him, like, why don't you want to talk to me about this? And he basically said, because whenever those people show up to the house, I get beat more. And it was such a hard thing for her to listen to, because what is she supposed to do? She wants to protect him, but on the other hand, if she calls again, then she knows that they're going to take it out on him. And this is where a lot of the proof of what happened to Gabriel came from. There was also a time that Pearl went into like the DF, whatever you call it, the DF, Department Humane Services. Everybody's got their own name for it in their own little state. It's basically where you get welfare. And Pearl went in there with her like kids to apply for it, and the security guard working, he immediately noticed that something was wrong with Gabriel, that he looked like he was beat up, and he was quoted saying that this woman was a bad woman. She looked like a gangbanger. And so he talked to his supervisor, or the person working there at the welfare place, and was like, what can we do about this? And he was basically told to stay out of it. And so what he did was, instead of staying out of it, and I just want to mention his name because he's a really good person. It's Arturo Martinez. So what Arturo Martinez decided, instead of staying out of it, is he called the police and he reported Pearl for child abuse. And the sad thing is that the police had been called multiple times on Pearl, and I believe 12 days before Gabriel died, the police had come to his house, and Pearl told them some kind of story about how he lies, he makes things up. They had Gabriel get in the backseat of their car, and they basically told him that if he wasn't a good little boy, that they were going to take him away. Can you imagine that? Like, you're getting beat, and the police show up, so you're thinking, oh, I might actually, like, get taken away and I might be saved. But instead, they put you in the back seat of their car, which is probably really scary because the back seat of a cop car is not a fun place to be. And they basically tell you that you're a liar and that you need to start being a good little boy. I just, really? Really? Like, really? Okay. So, yeah, that's what happened. And there were over 60 complaints to his workers, his caseworkers, the people that were supposed to protect him, of him being abused. Eyewitness accounts. 60 complaints, okay? And Gabriel only lived with Pearl and Isauro for 8 months. Think about that. 60 complaints in 8 months. Now, here is what they did to little Gabriel. You see, Gabriel didn't have a bedroom. He didn't have a bed. He was in Pearl's bedroom. There was like this cupboard, and they would take him and they would gag him and they would bind him and they would put him in the cupboard and they would lock him in there, sometimes for days, to like go to the bathroom on himself, to not eat, and just sit there in a cupboard in his mother's bedroom with her boyfriend. I mean, can you imagine some of the things that he heard or saw? And apparently his brother and sister, his brother Ezekiel, he talked about how he would go in there knowing that he was risking himself getting beat, and he would like shove fruits and bananas and stuff in there for Gabriel to eat because, that's his brother. And a lot of really bad things happened to Gabriel while he lived with them. And I just want to go over some of the bad things that happened to him. And this is going to be unpleasant, but it's important because we have to mention how this little boy was tortured, because you think him being in the cupboard was like the worst, right? Nope, no. We have cigarettes being put out on him. The mom used to shoot him in the groin and in the face with a BB gun, like metal BBs. Metal BBs can kill squirrels and all kind of little animals, but yes, that's what she shot him with. I believe that there was like some kind of like baseball bat that they used on him that had some like Spanish like torture name on it, like, I'm gonna beat you with this. They would punch him in the face. They would bite him. They would throw scalding water on him. They would put him in cold water, make him take cold baths. They starved him. They pretty much did, like, they cut him. They cut his genitals. They did, and then, because they thought he was gay, they forced him to dress like a girl. Because that's what you do. They choked him. Anything that you could do, they did. And then Pearl had like 4 cats, I think. They were like Siamese cats. So she loved these cats. And she would make Gabriel clean the cat litter and eat the cat litter and eat the cat feces. And then if he threw up, they would make him eat his own throw up. I think that's the most graphic of it. So we're gonna move on to the other stuff because that is a good place for me to go now. Gabriel just had a really, really horrible, hard, long life at his mother's, and I don't even know how she lives with herself. I don't know how her 2nd grade intellect can deal with what she's done. I do want to interject this one story that I actually ended up finding out about Pearl because it was important to me. The prosecutor there were actually 2 prosecutors that prosecuted this case, and one of them was like, they were actually both very like passionate about making sure that this little boy and the people that did not do right by this little boy, that he get justice. And Deputy District Attorney John Hatami and Deputy District Attorney Scott Young, I believe it was John Hatami, I don't know, maybe it was Scott Young. One of them basically said that they were both pure evil, and they hoped that they woke up in the middle of the night and screamed in terror at the thought of what they did. Now, I did like some research and reading up, and prison inmates love to write down their accounts of their time in prison because for them it's very traumatizing. And but you have to take it with a grain of salt, just because you don't know who you're dealing with. But I read a prisoner's account of someone who was Pearl's bunkie. So she went in there and she did not tell anybody that she killed her son. She told them that she was in prison for murdering the man that abused her son. She basically talked about how she was happy that she wasn't on death row all the time. And they also said that she would cry in the middle of the night and wake up in terror. And I just thought that was like something that really stood out in my mind because, the district attorney said that he wished that happened to her. And, if this prisoner's count on her is true, then it did. I don't know if she's crying out for Gabriel or her 4 cats, but she woke up in the middle of the night and cried out. That's something, right? Let's talk about Gabriel's brother and sister. Ezekiel and Virginia. They were 2 siblings, both older. They witnessed all that had happened, and they had actually gone into court and actually testified about the things that happened. There was no evidence that they were ever abused. They testified that Gabriel spent most of his time in the cubby, and Ezekiel would talk about how he would sneak into that room and give him food. Both kids were extremely traumatized and felt a lot of guilt for what had happened to Gabriel. I feel like Ezekiel just really wanted his brother to be okay. Virginia, she cried, and they asked why she was crying, and it's because she said that, Gabriel tried to play with her toys and she told him no and to get away, and she wished she would have let him play with the toys. And it was just very sad, and both of the kids knew that if they talked to Gabriel, that both Pearl and Isauro would beat them. And it was just I feel like there was a lot of mental abuse because they also made Ezekiel beat Gabriel, and Ezekiel would tell Gabriel, as soon as they start hitting you, just fall down to the ground and act like you're passed out. It's just such a hard thing for, an older brother to have to school their younger brother in how to survive. His mother and Isauro were both charged with first-degree murder with special circumstance of torture. And not only were they charged, but 4 social workers, 2 social workers, Stephanie Rodriguez, Patricia Clement, and 2 supervisor social workers, Kevin Bale and Gregory Merritt, were all charged for child abuse and all fired. Also, there were 9 police officers that were reprimanded that had actually showed up at that house that the apartment that Gabriel was at, that never did anything to protect Gabriel. Eventually, Isauro was convicted of capital punishment and is currently waiting on death row right now. Pearl ended up getting some kind of a plea bargain because of her diminished capacity, so she was not put on death row, and she basically has life without parole. The 4 social workers, they ended up not, like, the charges all ended up being dropped. The police officers, they were just reprimanded. But the important thing is that the 4 social workers, and like we could get into this for like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, but the thing is that never in history had social workers ever been charged with child abuse or neglect or not doing something right. And it was like a really big deal that happened. And even though the charges got dismissed, and I believe the charges got dismissed because they knew that if they actually got convicted, that anybody that became a social worker could be held accountable for what some of their clients do. And I felt like that was their way of protecting them. And I know that a lot of people are going to come for me for saying this, but social workers have a very hard time. Like, they have a lot of cases. And I'm not saying that what happened in this case is okay, because it's absolutely not. And somebody should have been held accountable. But they need more help, less cases, and they need to focus more on their individual cases. And one of the workers, Gabriel's case, was her first case that she had ever done. Like, she wasn't qualified to go into some kind of a case like this and not make a mistake. Like, you're gonna make a mistake when you start your job. It's just how you learn, or at least that's how I learn. And you know, I just think that there should be like a huge reform for the Child Protective Services, because obviously they're not doing what they should be doing. And that's hard for me to say because I feel bad for them. Like, out of all the things, I feel most bad for Gabriel. But like, out of all the people that did do something wrong, I do feel bad for the social workers, because I feel like there's just so much pressure put on them. And you know, like, who wants to be a social worker for abused children? Not a lot of people do, because they know that they're going to get like 100 cases, and you're supposed to make sure that you know what's going on with those children every second and every moment. And it's just, it needs to be fixed. It really does. And I'm glad that charges were brought on these social workers, because it kind of like woke everybody up. Like, wake up. Like, you can get in trouble for this. And it was a very good thing. And I watched the case. It was a very emotional case, and the prosecutors did an excellent job. And Arnold, Gabriel's dad, came and testified, and the prosecutors thought that Arnold was going to be weird with them because he had been to prison so many times, and they thought, you know, this is somebody, they're not going to like us because we're a prosecutor. But they ended up working together for the good of Gabriel, and they became very attached. And afterwards, the prosecutor came up to, like, you know, Arnold and like hugged him, and they started crying. And like, you know, the grandparents testified, and like, it was just very emotional. Something that is very sad also too, not that this wasn't sad enough, Michael Lemos Carenza, he actually died 14 months, that's one of the adoptive parents of Gabriel. He actually died 14 months after Gabriel died. And I find that as like a major coincidence, because like, I feel like he kind of almost died of like a broken heart, but that's just me. He could have died of something else. And then his other adoptive father, David Martinez, he was deported to El Salvador. And he was probably deported because of all the attention of this case. But that's me speculating too. The toxic branches of this case like reached out like everywhere. I got through the case, and I could tell you a lot more We could focus on the social workers. We could talk about all the other aspects that happened, and, you know, Gabriel had a friend, and we could go on and on and on. We could even talk about the little boy that died 6 months after Gabriel. That was almost like identical to Gabriel's death, and literally lived like, I think it was like 30 to 60 miles away from Gabriel. But we're not. We're going to stop here because I feel like I have said my piece. I don't know if I said anything that you couldn't have learned from the docuseries. I don't know. This was a very hard case for me to do, and I hope that I did it respectfully. I hope that you learned something. If I was to take one thing away from this case, it's to watch things, you know, like listen to children. If they tell you that they're being beat or someone's hurting them, like, listen to them. Like, especially if you're like a police officer or a social worker or somebody with authority that is in the position to help. Like, do whatever you can to help these kids, because this can't continue. And I don't understand how it happens, but it doesn't just happen on like a small scale. Like, oh no, like I could Google how many kids have died today of child abuse, and immediately faces would pop up, and those are just the faces that journalists feel are appropriate to put on the news. Like, kids die every day and they're not even reported because they're just not that interesting enough, I guess, you know. And that's horrible to say, but it's just, we as a society, we have to come together because we have to do better. And you know, somebody said something once, like one of my comments. I love some of my comments. They were like, I don't like you statements. Well, you know what? I don't like child abuse. And so this is a you statement. I guess it's a we statement. We all need to come together to work harder to make this place better for this society. Because when adults die, you kill the past. But when kids die, you kill the future. And that's a quote from a book that I really liked called Hold the Dark. I just read it. If you enjoyed this rant of this true account through Detroit AllyCat's eyes, it's me, please let me know. If you think that I did a horrible job, go ahead, let me know again. I love to hear your comments. But thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, because this was definitely not an easy case to do. And I'm going to go hold my cat and kiss my kids and cry for a little bit. So you have an amazing day. Please subscribe and stay safe and stay spooky. Bye.